Okay, so I'm gonna start recording just to make sure that we're not too behind.
Oh, I
Oh,
just
thank you.
pressed it.
Oh,
I'm
thank you,
sorry.
Haley. You're so already on top of it. Um, okay, so what I am talking about today is building rapport in our online classroom. So I know that, a lot of us have transitioned to teaching a lot online. Maybe, for a while, exclusively, right? And now, you might find yourselves with maybe more online sections than you used to 5 years ago. So, that can be great. And I think online learning can be so useful, right? And it can be so great for students who have, challenging schedules or, maybe they like don't want to derail their education too much, but they have something in a semester that's going to make, traditional learning difficult. There's like so many benefits, right, of online instruction, of taking a completely online, asynchronous class can, be so useful for a student. And sometimes it's kind of fun as an instructor, right? Like, you can adjunct at places that you don't like live, you can be a little bit more flexible. Always talk about how I love when I can like do work and whatnot, like in my pajamas or like I am right now, right? I have my dog on my lap. And so, I'm definitely not at all disparaging online learning, but sometimes it can be challenging, right? You feel us as faculty, right? We can feel really disconnected from our students, like, that it's just papers and names that kind of blur together, and you might not have any idea like what your student looks like, what their life is like, what they're experiencing outside of the class. So today I want to discuss what how we can kind of narrow a gap, right, of our students, in connecting with them and connect with them in more meaningful ways, and kind of what that looks like. So, how can we create this connection or this rapport with our students so they're not just, words on a page to us, and as such, we're not just words on a page to them, right? And so today I want to talk about like why we should care about having connection or rapport in our online classes. And, let's be honest about the challenges that it can present. And then I want to talk about different strategies and techniques that you can use to easily, usually, implement in your classes to create more of that connection, right? To have more rapport with your students. And if you're wondering, like, you know, who are you? And how do you know? So my name is Karina Levis. I'm in the government department here at ACC. I've been here since 2020, since January of 2020, which also was a very strange time to start a job. And I've been teaching online for various institutions since 2014, and in various places with different student populations, for both a couple of universities and a couple and different community colleges. So, I've kind of gotten different student populations in these online classes to kind of compare. Also, I regularly have high student success scores in my online classes, and often, have positive sort of reflections in my evaluations. And students, have mentioned that kind of, that they felt connected to me, that they felt that I cared, et cetera, even if though they were, sometimes very disconnected in this kind of online environment. So, and the picture is I was officiating, a friend's wedding and a bridesmaid. So I feel like, you can trust me, right? Because of that. So let's talk about, why should you care about having rapport, about having connection with your students? First, like it can help boost student success. You want students to do well. I don't know any of us who are like, oh, I kind of hope they all fail. We want them to succeed. And, this goes beyond us, right? The more of that connection that they have, the more they are likely to come back. And that can be, incredibly important for the college. And, I know myself, I want my students, to succeed beyond my class, and you want them to get their degree or to transfer to wherever they're going. Also, creating, making an effort to create that rapport, that connection helps students feel seen, helps them feel valued. It makes them feel, that they're not just words on a screen, and that's really important. And also, students who feel more connected, are more likely to participate. They're more likely to succeed in the class. And, there was been some research that demonstrated this. That article that I cited there actually, did a bunch of their statistical research with numbers of students in online instruction, like in the aftermath of closures during COVID, and found that, students who were able to kind of build their rapport, or professors that successfully built that rapport, the students were more likely to succeed, and, not derail their education. So that, there's lots of reasons to, to care about this, to try, etc. So, is it easy? Not always. Some of the things we have to overcome in that connection, right, that we're building, is that with an online class, right, there is a lack of interaction. Sometimes it does feel, like you're sort of the only, I don't know, voice in an empty room or whatever. You're shouting into the void. And, students can feel that as well. Also, there's technology barriers, whether on your end or their end, can make this complicated. The student themselves might feel like they're just one person in a huge class. They might feel invisible. And also, both of us, right? Both us as the instructor and the students can feel this kind of digital fatigue. So overcoming these issues requires intentional effort. So I'm going to talk about some strategies that I've utilized and that I do utilize in my online classes, and sometimes in my in-person classes too, right? To build that rapport and to have this good connection with students that, I think can, overcome a lot of these and can even persist like after the class ends. So let's talk my first strategy. Easy enough. I'm sure most of us do this in some capacity, is create a welcoming online environment, right? You want to make your Blackboard shelf easily, accessible, right? So make sure it looks nice, and adding little personalization, number one, makes it look different from all the other classes that they're also in, right? So that can help them, it helps you. If something looks nice, it speaks to you. And using that inclusive language, this where we're particularly, being encompassing of everyone. And also just a nice welcoming tone, like in the class materials, in announcements. Regular announcements can be really, really helpful in creating that. And you can see there, I have an example of one that I posted at the beginning of this semester, welcoming students to the class and, telling them I hope they had a good break. And then kind of what's expected from them, like, hey, do this, and you have a syllabus quiz and all of that. So posting regular announcements with that kind of stuff, like, hey, hope you're hanging in there. And just a reminder, is really helpful. And I am sometimes, I get like overwhelmed and I'm like, oh, I didn't remind them. Schedule ahead as your friend. So sometimes I'll schedule announcements, 2-3 weeks ahead, so that even if I'm not thinking about it, they're getting close to whatever being due, like, they're still having those reminders. So schedule ahead is your friend. And also, I think it's great to, in your online classes, to have like that welcome module with an introduction, like kind of letting them know. And then sometimes like a video welcome, right, with a tour of the course. So I always have a I record a video usually the night before the semester starts, but sometimes a little earlier if I'm, a little more on top of things. Discussing the syllabus, which can be really helpful for them, right? Because they hear my voice, and sometimes it's nice to have something explained to you verbally too. It can help everything click so they are understanding what the class policies are and that, and I'll, kind of go through the Blackboard. Hey, this is where you see this. This is where you see this. You'll turn this in. That just makes it feel a little less foreign. And they're hearing your voice. They potentially, and how you record it, they can see your face too. So that can be really helpful. And I'll tell you something else. When I have that, usually at the end of that, little introduction discussion of the syllabus, I'm like, hey, you listen to this whole thing. If you send me an email, I'll give you a little bit of extra credit. So, then they already are like, I fulfilled this obligation and she is rewarding me with it. So you don't have to do that, right? Like, yeah, it's in their best interest to watch those things, but sometimes that can help build that connection with them. Also, I think it's also a good idea to personalize your Blackboard shell the best you can, to kind of make it look not like all their other classes, to so things look nice. Even if you just use a simple graphic as like the course card, it makes it easier for me because then I have an idea of like which of my classes are which. And when I'm in that class on Blackboard, I'm like, wait, is this history? Is this Texas government? Is it this section of this Texas government? But, when you start to associate the pictures, right, that, reminds you where you are and also reminds them where they are and helps, distinguish them where they are. So then they start to associate your voice and your expectations, and they're remembering that when they're in their class. So that's just a pretty easy way to kind of like, creating a welcoming environment. You're telling them, that is their class. So you can see those are my current classes this semester, and that's what that looks like for me. So another good strategy I think that we can do is to humanize ourselves, right? That we're not just a faceless person or, like a computer or whatever running this class, that you are an individual and, show some personality. So you can share, a little bit of your interest, to have them available on Blackboard to let them know. So sometimes with me, I talked about making regular announcements. Sometimes, something will happen and I'm a little bit behind in grading. So I'm, letting them know like, hey, this is when you can expect to have this graded by. And I'll give them a little personal tidbit like, sorry, this is, I'm a little behind. Like I was in a wedding last weekend, and, so then they kind of know like, oh, she's not just ignoring our class, she's got this going on, or what have you. Like there's a line, right? You don't need to be like, well, I'm going to, I don't know, something sad or whatever. It's whatever you feel comfortable with. But sometimes, giving them a little bit of information can really help and build that connection, so they feel more kind of trusting of you, and they can feel like they know you a little bit better. And the video introductions can help a lot with this. Sometimes you can do like an informal check-in. Sometimes I'll make a video kind of midway through the semester, kind of trying to take the temperature of where everyone's at, kind of talking about like, this is what we've done and this is what we're gonna do. And even sometimes if I don't do that, just that welcome introduction of with the recorded syllabus explanation at the beginning, can really kind of give them an idea more about, who I am and all of that. And, that those both are going to help you show an understanding of student issues. You're a human too. Like, if I'm like, sorry, I'm really behind in your grading. This happened to me last semester. I started the semester with COVID, and then it was really hard for me to ever catch up. If I'm being honest about that, then they are like, I also had COVID and I've been out. Like, is it okay to have an extension on this? Maybe you're not going to give an extension. That's okay. But at least you can show like, that you feel their pain, that you were going through this issue too. So, that kind of showing of your own humanity can help with that. So, that's kind of, these are sort of easy ways to humanize yourself, and that can really help build that connection. And also, I think having this kind of speaks to creating that in welcoming online environment. But pictures can also be an easy way to kind of humanize yourself. And this is pretty easy to do. So you can see I have a like welcome picture, that has information about me. So they can kind of know like, oh, this is where she went to school. And then, I have like, I like to craft and stuff like that. And then I have pictures of pets. I feel, that is a good uniter for everyone, right? Students always like to appreciate to see that, and it's not too much information, it's not too personal, but that kind of personalized graphic with that kind of stuff helps build our connection, and lets them feel like I'm not just a faceless tyrant who doesn't let them turn stuff in late, or yells at them for not following directions. That these are things about me, and that can really help. And sometimes even just a it doesn't have to just be at the beginning of the semester. You can add stuff in, like the beginning of the semester when we had the snow, I was like, hey, don't forget about this participation activity that you have coming up, but also here's my dog in the snow. And so a lot of students sent me their animals too, and that's always a fun perk of this too, right? And so it doesn't have to be these kind of graphics that you're making, but sometimes sharing pictures or just having a picture of yourself on your Blackboard page. And so students can see it. And it's even better if you can have like some kind of candid pictures that show you do you're doing something besides like a headshot, right? And you're business casual, or that show you doing something you like, or what have you, right? Like that very much can be useful, and that's kind of a fun and easy way that we can kind of unite together with our students and build that rapport. Another easiest kind of strategy to implement for building that connection and that rapport is this consistent personalized communication, right? So we don't want them to feel that they're just a crowd, a face, I don't know, a blurry face in the crowd. I don't know where I was going with that analogy. And that they're just one of many. So hearing from us regularly to have that communication can help that. So I try to have regular announcements with course updates, and I try to have encouragement in there too. Again, remember, sometimes if you're forgetting to do this kind of like week by week, having a few at the end scheduled ahead is very much your friend here. And kind of personal stuff or personalized stuff and encouragement, right? So they're hearing from you, they see your name, and you're telling them what's going on. Like, hey, don't worry. I promise you can do this. I always send like a reassuring announcement as we get closer to an exam, that because a lot of students get nervous. If you're doing these things, you're going to do great. And also sometimes I have students who take the first test and they still do fine in the class, so that kind of reassurance can be helpful. Don't tell them that if it's not true though. You're setting yourself up for pain. Also, using a student's name in communication, right? So sometimes it's easy to just reply to an email without that, but when we both acknowledge each other's names, right? We're you're a person, I'm a person, let's acknowledge that we're acknowledging each other's humanity, and that's a good way to maintain that connection. So sometimes, like if I'm like reading a student email and I'm like you're feeling so annoyed when you're writing your response, like if I start out with like addressing them by their name, I'm like, oh yeah, they're a person, and then they're and they're trying their best just like I am. And sometimes that can help us, and it helps them feel more seen as well. And this personalized feedback and kind of personalized information to that student can be very important too. So I think this is probably the most kind of impactful thing. Well, students like my little fun pictures, but the kind of most impactful thing I do to help me with this building of rapport, for this personalized feedback and communication is that at the beginning of the semester for all of my classes, online classes, I have like an introductory assignment where I have them introduce themselves to me. So I have like a screenshot of it there. You can see, is there something you'd prefer to be called? Like, if they go by their middle name or Will instead of William or whatever. So I know that. So when I'm sending emails, or whatever, I am using the name that they prefer. I also like to ask, like, where are you in school? Did you just start? Are you about to finish here at ACC? Are you a dual credit student, right? So that kind of gives me an idea. So then if it's a class that's not tailored to dual credit and a bunch of them are like, I'm a senior at Shadow Creek, then I know that, right? And that can help you sort of understand what their struggles are. I like to ask them, like, what are they hoping to do after? What do you like to do? Otherwise, is there anything you're hoping to get out of this class? So, if I have a student that's like, I'm really into, I don't know, constitutional theory, hope not, but then I can kind of tailor information or add things to not assignments, to like the lecture material, right? So I know that student is interested in it. That doesn't happen a lot, but it happens sometimes, and that's fun. Also, I like to ask them, like, do you want to recommend anything to me? Is there something that you're really liking, like a show or a movie? Also, tell me where you think I should go in this area. Is there a coffee shop you think is awesome? Is there a park I need to go to? And things like that. So, I will, at the beginning of the semester, compile. Some semesters I'm better about this than others, I'm going to be honest, but I will compile this information in a Google Doc, actually a Word doc, but I always say Google Doc because I can, like, the OneDrive, right? And so that I can access it from wherever I am. And sometimes, like, if a student is having a lot of trouble on something, if I know they're doing poorly, or if, I just want to be reassuring, I can go back to that and I see that they recommended that I go to like 1820 coffee shop or something. And I'll be like, well, oh, by the way, I went to that coffee, 1820 coffee, and it was so good. And sometimes you're not actually going to do that, right? Like, they give me a lot of great recommendations. Sometimes, I've been there and I feel like, oh yeah, it's so good. And sometimes I'm like, probably not. But, just that kind of little tidbit, right, that you can bring up. It helps me feel connected to them, right? Because I'm like, we should go to this place with my husband because a student recommended it to me. And a lot of times, they're sending you to a place that we enjoyed, that we liked, or that we want to go again, and sharing that with them, right? They feel like someone listened to them, someone took their advice, and that helps them feel very much a part of your class. And, I've seen that kind of feedback, from students and evaluations, and then reaching out to me after. Hey, I've never met you before, but, you're always so welcoming, or you're always so nice. And I really appreciate that. Like, that kind of thing, of this kind of easy thing. And sometimes it's a place I already went, right? So it doesn't necessarily, cost you any effort to have that kind of, information on hand. And sometimes you're not even going to compile it. That's okay, because, that takes a lot of time and you don't have that. And that's, but some, if a student's really struggling, you can go back and look at their submitted assignment and kind of see what they said. And sometimes even going back and be like, oh, you recommended this book and I just read it. It was so great. Like, that kind of comment, can be really powerful for students. And I like it too. I like when they give me recommendations, even if it's not something necessarily I'm super interested in. Like, I appreciate that they, them sharing what they like with me, and that helps me feel, better better morale in the job, right? So I just think that kind of assignment, and maybe it doesn't work perfectly in your class, but you can kind of, factor something like that in, and that can help you have that kind of connection with students. So along with that, with that intro assignment, so when I grade that on Blackboard, they submitted it with Turnitin. I'll leave them long comments, and sometimes they tell me about their pets, and I'm like, give your dog a treat for me. And then, I look back 3 weeks later and not a single person read all my comments. I'm like, no one gave their dog a treat for me. And also it took me like an hour and a half out of my life, right, to grade those, to write all those comments. So reading feedback on Blackboard is not necessarily super intuitive for students, which is something that annoys me endlessly, but here we are. And so sometimes just reminders to students of how to get to that is helpful, right? To make sure that they're actually reading it so they can see your beautiful personalized feedback. So just having like a message like, this is how you do it. So you can see my graphic there. If you click the grade and it'll open the submission, you click the feedback button. And so that's something to keep in mind too. That it doesn't have to just be with your with emails and stuff, leaving that kind of feedback with their grades, helps them feel, oh, it's not just a bunch of numbers I'm getting, right? That they, that you're actually reading what they're doing. They're not just screaming it into the void. Just like we don't want to feel like we're screaming into the void with our emails and lectures and all the work we put in, right? So I think, just reminding them of how to get there can be really helpful. So some other kind of strategies I employ that we can all use, right, to help build that connection, build rapport. Sometimes, just kind of tailoring assignments or discussion prompts, that connect to their lives, giving them the opportunity to think about like, how does this relate to what I've seen or where I'm from or whatever. So kind of an example, from government, right, which is going to be different. When we have discussions about political culture, I will, have them, kind of think about political cultures and which ones they've seen, where they grew up, and kind of make those connections. And, sometimes I'll have them also compare these political subcultures to movies or shows and whatnot that they're familiar with, to kind of make those connections. And when they can think about things in relation to what they're going through, right, that is very powerful. Also, sometimes the employing of extra credit in certain ways can do things to build rapport. I'm not saying you have to give extra credit all the time, but I told you about the end of my like little syllabus explanation video I do at the beginning of the semester. I say, you watch this whole thing. If you send me an email with this, I will give you some extra credit, so they already, kind of have that trust that, you know, completing these is gonna have a reward. And they're like, oh, I listened to that whole thing and it was helpful and I got a point already. Also, something that I like to do, if you're going to give any extra credit questions on an exam, I have been doing this for the last couple years, and it's probably like the favorite thing that I do it like in my classes, and I do it for in-person classes too, just because I enjoy it so much. But I will just ask, like, is there anything cool or exciting, or tell me something cool or exciting, as the last question on a test for extra credit. Just to give them half a point, and just the kind of random and delightful things that they tell me, from ranging from like, oh, I'm so excited I'm graduating in 2 weeks, or I'm graduating next week, or, like it's my mom's birthday and we're all going out to dinner tonight, like, to just random facts about an animal they like. It can be very delightful. And that kind of, me responding to whatever they said, can help build, that connection, that rapport. So I had a student in the mini in December and January, who for her last test and the answering to that question, she told me that she had a job interview in her healthcare field, right? Or the next day, and she was like really excited about it and hoping, that everything works out. And that would be a great opportunity for her and good for her family and all that. So, I asked like a follow-up question. I was like, "Oh, where are you interviewing?" So best of luck, hope it goes well, like, and all that. So got an email from her, she's like told me where she was interviewing at. And then like 2 weeks later, when the class had ended, the grades were posted, she sent me an email to, telling me like, "I know you were thinking about me for my job interview, and I just found out I got the job." So that kind of, it was such an easy thing for me to do, just to, ask this kind of fun prompt of like, "Tell me something cool or something exciting." It gave her the opportunity to share something she was genuinely excited about, and, was able to, continue that excitement, right? And shared with me that she had got the job. So that kind of, it's fun. And honestly, it's so delightful to read the things that they tell you, that they're excited about. Some, with dual credit students, sometimes like, "I found out that the boy I like also likes me." And then, that makes me feel such like a special part of their life that they're going to share that with me. So, I highly recommend doing that. It's just very fun. Even if you just do it on the last test at the very end of the semester, like, it is a fun way. If you want to have like a "give me extra credit" question, just to learn some very fun things, and sometimes, delightfully random things too. Other ways that we can kind of build rapport in our online courses, sometimes having an optional Teams meeting for Q&As, and, just to kind of check in, see how everyone's doing. Some semesters I'll do this more than others. It works better sometimes. But that can be a fun way to, for them to kind of see you more, you know, to be like, "Well, I'm struggling with this," to get an explanation. That can be really helpful. And then sometimes setting, thank yous or shout outs in the announcements can, help build that rapport as well, right? Like that, we, acknowledging things. And this doesn't work for every class, and I don't do this super duper often. But sometimes a student will like point out that there was a problem with their accessing an assignment or something. And sometimes, I'll be like, I'll tell them that the issue was addressed, and like, "Thanks to whoever for pointing it out to me." That helps the students kind of know, like, "Oh yeah, there are other people in this class and not just me." That student feels seen as well. So, we can kind of use all these different strategies to, um, bring it all together, and you can use that in your personalized announcements and your regular announcements. That can be a fun way to build a fun and easy way, right, to build rapport in our classes. So let's talk about some of the tools that I use when I'm doing all of these things, right, to try to build this connection in my courses. So, all the little fun pictures that I make of the announcements, and I make on Canva. So if you've never used Canva before, it's like an online, it's a website that you go to, and there's an app and stuff. Uh, and it has all these different templates for different things, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation or an Instagram post, or a poster for a school. It has all these different templates that you can, pick and personalize to whatever you're trying to say. I don't know how to design things, professionally or anything. I don't necessarily have a very good eye for like design and making graphics, but it's very easy to use. You can pick whichever template you like, and then you just personalize. It's easy to save. Then you can post it to your classes. You can do anything that you, would need to do with a free account. Also, if you sign up as an educator, you get like free access to most of the stuff, or you can get a pro account, which means, you have access to everything. It's like $12 a month. But you don't need it. You can do a free one if it's something you're interested in. So you saw examples of pictures and stuff that I use Canva for. Also, I like it to make rubrics that are really easy. I don't really like in Blackboard Ultra, like how the tables look in documents and stuff. So easy, accessible ways to make rubrics and other things that, so that's something that can be definitely useful in your classes, online or not. Also, of course, using Microsoft Teams for class meetings, for sometimes, having a meeting with a student can be very useful. We're amping up that communication and engagement. And, sometimes you can have them engage with each other. So sometimes for my online classes, I'll have a Microsoft Teams, team made with the class, and setting up like a message board. They can communicate with each other and be like, hey, does anyone know, like, how do I do this? And sometimes that helps save you a couple emails, if they're getting that information for each other. So that's building up their, feeling of connection, and maybe it's helping you a little bit. Also for recording videos, and, if you want to go through your syllabus, or just, have a video of you, like, hi, welcome to the class. Teams is really good for doing that. You just set up a meeting, and then you can record it, and that recording is already in your OneDrive. I really like, it used to be called Screencast-O-Matic, and then they changed the name to ScreenPal, which I don't think is as good of a name, but they didn't ask me. And ACC pays for, access to that. You don't have to download, or you don't have to pay for it. ACC provides that for you, so you can record that, and that makes it super easy to record lecture material, and or any kind of, intro. Also, sometimes you could just record it from your webcam on your device, or your phone, and there's lots of easy ways. I've also used my phone to like record a video. I had lectured about a certain event, and then I happened to, during spring break, like go through the town where that protest took place, and so I like made a little video showing this museum commemorating that on the way there, and posted that for students. And sometimes your phone, you use those kind of fun on the go kind of videos, or if you just wanted to record a short video like welcome to spring 2025, etc. Your just your webcam or your phone would work just fine for that. And, there's can be a good use for all of these. So other things that you could use, or that I use, that OneDrive, Word doc, or a Google Doc, right? Can be really useful in remembering, if you have students that go by a different name, you could have that. So if you're emailing them, you're not accidentally using the wrong name. Or, sometimes I'll put like what their recommendations were for me. So if I have a student email me, really struggling about something, they're going to be late because they're, a grandparent passed away, or a grandparent is sick, or whatever. Sometimes me adding like, oh, I remember you recommended me to see this movie. And I did, like, just adding that at the end can, can really help them be seen. And then if you have that information in that OneDrive, it's, you're able to access that more easily. Also, there's different Blackboard features that are useful in this. Being able to send those messages to students from there, sometimes like right from the grade book, right? You can just click that button to send them a message. And also, you can use, it's easy to add the feedback there. And also, sometimes it allows you to add like video comments and whatnot, and hosting video. So Blackboard, can help us too. Also, another thing that I use sometimes in online classes is I will post a fun little Kahoot, which is like an app and a thing that kids are usually familiar with because they did it through high school, where it's kind of like a Jeopardy game, right, that they can, use to review. So I will have created a class, and post the link to my students. And even though we're not all together, right, they can take those, go through that, answer the questions, and, they're also studying for my test, but also, they can compare their scores to the rest of the class. And that's, kind of fun, and they get a score, and then, that helps them feel more confident for the test. I have the free version. It always wants me to upgrade. I never have, but the free version is fine. But if you don't have a Kahoot account, whenever you sign up, you do have to put that you're like a K through 12 instructor. Otherwise, it'll make you pay from the get-go. So learn from that. So those are just tools that I have used and do use, that can be useful in these online classes to help us, build this rapport with students. So is this all always easy and like, super clear cut? Absolutely not, right? Like there's different things that we have to consider and I have to consider and kind of find where the line is. So it does come with challenges, right? Like I want to be approachable to students, but also have to be professional, so want to, show them that humanize myself to I'm a person, I have these interests, but also balancing of professionalism there, is important too. Also, I think that it is important to set communication boundaries with students because yeah, they're doing this class all the time, but you're not, and there is this divide between your work and not. So I like to have actual clear guidelines of like email etiquette, like it's not a text message, have that clear. And then also I have clear expectations of like, sometimes I'm going to answer your email really quickly. Sometimes it's going to take me a little longer. I'm usually not checking my email after this hour. And that can, setting those boundaries, right, can help you kind of overcome these problems. And they're aware of like not to expect those things from the jump. Also, it's important, and this is something that, I am constantly sort of fighting with where is the line and where is the and how to do this perfectly is, responding to students who are having a difficult time, right? Because life is hard and we know it and they know it. And sometimes, they are honestly going through something that is really tough, or it just feels extremely tough to them because, they're not used to feeling that way. So responding to them with empathy and like having success, or, and having those feelings for them is really important. But also it's okay, right, to be firm. Just, you don't have to sacrifice your class policies, to have rapport with your students, right? Sometimes I'm like, so sorry to hear that. Sorry you're struggling. Unfortunately, that assignment is closed, but nevertheless, here's all these other ways that you can still succeed in the class. And, allowing them to be, heard for whatever problem that they're having, I think is really important. But it's okay to not, you don't have to be like, well, since you asked really nicely, the due dates don't matter. Like, I don't think that is part of this. I think students, even though I'm not letting them turn things in 8 times and all this, right? Like that, they still have rapport with me. So that is something also, to kind of find the balance of whatever works for you. So what are some benefits that you can see in these deliberate efforts, right, to help build rapport in your classes? So, student success. I'm not saying like if you start posting announcements with people's names, like, the average in your class is going to go up. But I think, with employing these regularly and making these efforts to have this connection with students, you'll see these student success rates rise, and then that blends into increased retention and improve retention throughout the college, right? Higher graduation rates, always good for us. And, with the student is more likely to succeed in our class, that's putting them on a path, right, to do better their next semesters and, to have overall, more academic success, which, of course we all want. So, also, I think that it is so beneficial for our morale, right? As the instructor, as the person behind the screen, to giving them these assignments and making these policies, having that increased connection with our online students, I think makes the job feel more satisfying, right? More, better, and it makes you feel, like you're having more of an impact than when you just like, kind of only hear from these students and then you never see them and then you never hear from them again, right? Having that connection, improves your own job satisfaction. So, I just would like to hear from y'all. Is there any of these strategies that you would like to use, or is there anything that you do that you think I miss? I would love to hear it. Oh, there were so many messages. I'm sorry, I didn't see these.
Yeah, we have Haley. She raised her hand.
Hi, Haley.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a long time to figure out how to turn my camera back on. No, I just wanted to add, I think that everything that you said was great. I wanted to give a few examples. I have started to revamp a little bit, especially with my online classes. And I just wanted to go through a couple of things that you said and kind of talk about how I use those and what I came up with. So the introducing myself is something that the older I get, it's become harder for me to do.
Yeah.
Because even though like I really like sports and I think a lot of students like sports, I'm finding it hard. I also find it hard to get the students to introduce themselves because I find that they think that it's silly. So what I've started doing, and it is working, well, I think it's working in my class at least, I have started introducing myself as what I like to call a geriatric millennial. So I explain to them what that is, right? And then I tell them in class, hey, Google characteristics of a millennial and let's talk about it, right? So they'll say the first thing that comes up if you want to know about a millennial is that they're tech savvy, right? Because they grew up in the age of technology. And I explained to them, y'all, but I'm a geriatric millennial. Okay. So when I first started, and I first got into education, I didn't have all that technology. So I had a card catalog, right? I had to look up things in the encyclopedia. So that's how I initially learned. So while I can adapt to technology quickly, because I'm a geriatric millennial, I will hold on to something as long as I can. And I tell them how, when all of my friends first started texting, I refused because it was, you know how you could get an unlimited texting plan, or if you didn't, it was like 25 cents a text message. And I explained to them, like I was the last holdout. And I told all my friends that's silly. People are not going to communicate that way. Like, stop it. And how wrong was I? Right. Like, so I have introduced myself through that. And the students they think it's funny. They really, and so I will tell them, don't tell me how old you are, but Google what generation is blank year, right? And then Google that generation. And then I want you to pick 3 things from that generation, characteristics of that generation. And I want you to respond to this discussion board and agree or disagree based on who you are, right? So if your generation, if it says that you are collaborative and prefer teamwork, do you agree with that for yourself or not? And then we take that into a whole class discussion. And I feel like that, as far as building relationships goes, that has helped a lot. And I use that throughout, right? Because I will come back and I'll say, y'all know millennials, we are task oriented. I need a to-do list. Add that to my to-do list, right? So they really get a kick out of that. Another thing that I'm doing tomorrow, this is only the second time I'm doing this. Well, I say tomorrow, next week, because we're switching over from 8 weeks. This is an in-class face-to-face assignment, but it can be done online as well. I'm going to have my students write a letter to a future student of mine and tell them, like, what do they need to know about this class? What do they need to do to be prepared? What's the hardest thing? What are some skills that they're going to need? And then I read them and I choose the ones that, I wouldn't pass out anything that hadn't passed the test or whatever. And last semester, I only got like 8 good ones, right? That I felt like these are legible because I had them handwrite them. But I took 8 and I made copies for all of my students. And then I put them in envelopes and pass them out on the first day. And that is that's what we do for our opening day activity.
I love that. That sounds fun.
And then one more thing that I do is that I embed, I call them Easter eggs because Taylor Swift made that very popular and a lot of my students can resonate with that. I put Easter eggs throughout my online course. I start it really easily. In English, we have a gradebook column called professionalism, and there's an Easter egg every week. And in the grade book, it says Easter egg week 1, and I put it in that professionalism category, and they get harder. So the first week, somewhere in my welcome video, I'm like, the Easter egg for this week is the definition of a comma splice. So look up what a comma splice is and email it to me. And here's the deadline in your own words, a definition, and then you get credit. But then the next week, it's two things you have to do, right? And when I give them the first one, I'll say, don't do this because there's a second part. And then finally, what I do is when I give them feedback, that's always part of the Easter egg. And it's somewhere on their feedback, there's a bubble that says the code this week is green. And that's part of that little that they have to do every week. I know that was a lot. I just wanted to share that. All people are saying, Rosalinda says she's been doing that for years. That's so cool. So they're asking about the announcements.
Yes. So, Denise, when I let me show you. So you can see that this is an online, class. Don't look at how many things I have to grade. So I will just insert the image. So this isn't perfect because this is a screenshot, but, so.
I'm going to try to follow you. Hold on.
Yes, just insert it as a picture. Something that if you do, in case you have vision impaired students, I try to put the text of the announcement in the alternative text just to make it more accessible. But you can just summarize it too. So then that photo, so this is a screenshot, so it's the whole thing, but so then that shows up, and then you can kind of tweak it and get it to the size that you like as well. And you can do that same strategy whenever you make like a document in one of your Blackboard modules. I regularly post that picture of here's how to read your feedback. So it works there too, not just for an announcement.
Right. I don't know why I didn't think about that. I do it in Blackboard, but not the announcement. And I was thinking, how do I get a picture in there?
Yeah.
It's right in front of my face.
Thanks. I mean, and not everyone is reading them, but I think it kind of nice if they do go through and read announcements, that kind of helps build this kind of certain feeling of your class.
Yeah.
Do we have another question? I see a hand. Yeah. Oh. No problem. You want to type it out? I can try to help. Oh, okay. I think, Haley had really good strategies as well. I would love to hear other people's, it's always so fun, right? To hear different, sometimes they're so easy, just different things I hadn't thought to do, from other instructors. And that's kind of the fun thing, for those of you who've been chair, you've been faculty lead, looking at other people's Blackboards, you're like, oh, that's a fun way to do that.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm Rosalinda Esguerra. I teach English. One of the things I do is I record my weekly video, which I call my weekly video overview, which goes over everything. But I also have a document called a weekly guidance for each week. I can upload it. It's actually created through Publisher. And every week I change it up. So when I do the weekly guidance, I'm pretty much just going over the overview. But as you mentioned, I always add a little comment at the end. So if I have them do an annotated bibliography, and then I wait till the end and I'll say, if you watch this entire video, instead of the 5 sources, you only need 3 to get full credit. And so when I get those annotated bibliographies in, I knew who watched my video and who didn't.
I love that. Oh, that's a good idea. Just be like, if you watch this, you can do this assignment a little different. That's great. Hopefully, there were lots of things that y'all could take away from this and, incorporate, in your classes. And I really appreciate everyone's, ideas for me and ways that I can, further bolster this in my classes. Are there any other comments anybody has? No.
I just
I
want to
appreciate-
appreciate the informal check-ins thing. That is something that I'm a big fan of, and I feel like that it's very important. I have never taught a fully online class
Okay.
before, but I do that in my face-to-face class. So, it makes a huge difference when the students are coming in and just sort of, I have a slide where I say, okay, how are you feeling? Or things like, okay, can you draw an emoji to tell me
Oh, that's a
how
good
is it
idea.
going for you? So, that kind of helps me understand if they're going through something or how they're, doing, and so that I can, yeah. So just adds
Yeah.
on to what you said, yeah.
Yeah. I love the different fun ways that we can take the temperature of a in-person class. And then, do we just have to kind of come up with different strategies on how to do that effectively, in the online space.
Yeah, those informal interactions should be a part of.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
He is feeling so feisty today because it's nice outside. He wants to go outside, and a male person came by earlier. The nerve of them. So he's all excited. I'm sure we can relate. Alrighty, well, I really appreciate everyone coming. Sorry for the tech issues at the beginning, and we had moved some things around so that I appreciate that y'all were flexible in coming to this. And please let me know. Please reach out if you need anything or any guidance on how to do any of these things. I am so happy to help you do that.
I can stop the recording now, Karina. Do you want to do
Perfect.
that? Yeah. Do we have more questions? No. Okay.
Oh, so how do you pick the time? So sometimes I will offer a a couple of times, and then sometimes doing a poll, you can create one in Teams and send to your class. You can kind of get an idea of what time works best. Sometimes, I'll do an afternoon and an evening one, 2 days in the week, and if they can come, they can come. But as long as it's important just not to make those meetings mandatory, because if students did sign up for an asynchronous class, right, and not docking them for not being able to come. But I think the polling often helps, and then just kind of having a a variety of things can help that. But I've had some semesters where students were not into it at all. So I was like, well, I tried it a couple times and no one came, and that's and that's fine too. Thank you. Thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your semester, and all your classes go well. And we have fun, debriefing after this. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Karina. I haven't stopped the recording because I don't know how. Did you start or
Haley started it.
Haley started, right? Okay.
Haley, can you stop
yeah.
the recording?
I can.
Hey, how do we get back to